of Zack Snyder's directing abilities is as follows. We got Dawn of the Dead remake in, I believe it was 2003, and unfortunately, I was way too young at the time to be able to watch that. I watched it a couple years ago. I don't fully remember it, so I'm not going to critique it or criticize it in any way. Then we got 300, which was made in 06, 07. Then we got Watchmen, which personally is my all-time favorite Zack Snyder film, set aside Army of the Dead, which I'll get into in this video, so exclude that for now. So after Watchmen, which was a gold standing achievement in directing efforts and in comic adaptation, basically. Then after Watchmen, we got Sucker Punch by Zack Snyder, which, again, admittedly, I didn't get the chance to watch. I wanted to watch it. I saw the trailers back in 2011, I believe, is when it released. But I do know that basically everybody, if not the vast majority, disliked Sucker Punch, mainly because it was just a visual treat with no substance whatsoever inside of it. Then after Sucker Punch, I believe we got Man of Steel, which was the first reboot for the Superman DCEU franchise. And Man of Steel, I really like the story, and I do really like the directing effort from Zack Snyder for Man of Steel. What I dislike about Man of Steel is the pacing problems and the tonal inconsistency throughout. 1 minute, and it's usually set, the tone inconsistencies usually lie between the past and the present. So in the past, it's more of a dreary time, and in the present, it's still dreary, but there's some semblance of hope, whereas the past, it's kind of an uprising story about a kid that's growing up and learning to deal with his powers to try and save people, but at the same time hiding it because the world and the human population, the human race, is not ready for a kind of alien that he is. And then the present day is basically him exposing himself more just because he needs and wants to save people. And I liked Man of Steel. It's nowhere near a perfect film. Like I said, it has a lot of pacing problems and tonal inconsistencies, mainly because of the editing in Man of Steel. The editing is terrible. It's just awful. A 2.5 hour film. It probably should have been a 3-hour film. So after Man of Steel, we got Batman v Superman, which I don't mind either versions, the theatrical and the ultimate release. The reason I don't mind either of them is because they each possess their own unique abilities in the story, in the narrative. So the theatrical release, some of the stuff that they took out to make it PG-13 and a shorter runtime actually builds up a little bit more of plot twists in the story. And I do appreciate that aspect of the theatrical release. Outside of that, the theatrical release is a very incoherent mess. The Ultimate Edition is 3 hours, rated R. It's honestly a relatively mild R rating. It's not the most graphic film to ever be made, not by a long shot. But the Ultimate Edition fleshed out the story and narrative a lot more. But the Ultimate Edition, which is the true director's cut, it also sacrifices some plot twists in it. So after Batman v Superman from Zack Snyder, then we get the Frankenstein's monster of Justice League, which, as I prefaced in my Justice League review a couple months ago, that just has bad history behind it. Zack Snyder helmed it, then he had to walk away because his daughter passed away from suicide, and Warner Bros. Inevitably just kind of axed him and brought in Joss Whedon, who took what Zack Snyder made and just tried to make as much comedic scenes as he could and implement extra scenes. He was trying to turn Zack Snyder's Justice League into the Avengers 2.0, and in doing so, it was god-awful. There was no character development. All of the characters were just bland, unoriginal, uninspired, just there, especially Aquaman, Flash, and Cyborg, which before Justice League we knew nothing about, technically. And Joss Whedon treated it like we knew everybody, just like the Avengers. And then, a couple months ago, and within the last year and a half, Warner Bros. Brought Zack Snyder back to redo his original idea for Justice League, turned a piece of crap 2-hour film back into a 4-hour behemoth, which I liked. Zack Snyder's Justice League, nowhere near perfect. There were a lot of problems, a lot of bad scenes, mostly technical problems in the slow-mo parts where characters would be running in slow motion while the environment was just kind of still happening in real time. But otherwise, though, if you look past the technical problems, Zack Snyder's Justice League is at least by far better than the theatrical release. So now, a couple months after Zack Snyder's Justice League released, we get Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead. He comes back to the zombie genre. And as I prefaced already, I believe I watched the remake of Dawn of the Dead a couple years ago. I don't fully remember. What I can say about Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead is that this is a complete reinvention of the zombie genre. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than you would expect it to be. Hands down, the absolute best scene in Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead is the intro credits. Okay, the very beginning intro is kind of meh, but the lead up, right at the very end of the main intro, where it shows the zombies just kind of lurking and staring at the newly found, newly discovered city of Las Vegas that they're going to inevitably take over, that is jaw-dropping cinematography right there. That is a great, badass scene that Zack Snyder filmed. And I should also preface too, this one, more so than Justice League, this is Zack Snyder's baby. If you look at all of the credits, you'll see his name plastered on like 95% of all the details for how it was published and produced and everything. Zack Snyder basically completely made Army of the Dead himself. He had help, but literally every category basically has his name in it. And that's mostly a good thing because, as I prefaced and as I already said, Army of the Dead is a really good film. Not without its flaws, but this is easily one of his best films to date. So as I said, the best scene by far is the credits, and I was getting to that. After they're gleaming on Las Vegas, then it hits the credits for the beginning. And that is just jaw-dropping, that just an amazing credit sequence. During the film, we get some jokes within the zombie genre cliche. So there'll be a character that'll be talking to another character, and they'll just come up with a one-off zombie genre cliche joke. And for the most part, they land. They're pretty funny because at least they're self-aware and they make themselves self-referential within the genre itself. I honestly did not find any bad character in this film, and by bad character, I mean poorly written or anything. The only standout as far as that, I would say, is Theo Rossi's character. He's just kind of a one-dimensional dummy security guard for the outskirts of the city after it's infested by zombies. But otherwise, outside of that, his character's story ends up being resolved rather quickly, but every character outside of his character, I think they did very much a lot of justice for. Every character at least has 15 minutes to shine. And this is a 2.5-hour film, and 15 minutes for every character is actually saying the bare minimum. This is not a gore-fest zombie film. This is a zombie film within a character study. So we have Dave Bautista as the main character, and then we have a whole lineup for a cast. As I mentioned, Theo Rossi as a security guard. I can't think of many other names off the top of my head right now, but what I appreciate mostly for the writing itself in Army of the Dead is the attention to character detail. You get to discover and rediscover all of these characters' history. Like, the pre-credit sequence actually does a really good job at kind of taking you into every character's history with the city and how they broke out, and it shows you actually what their special abilities and skills are within the pre-credits. So then all they had to do was write and work off of that pre-credits, and I think they did a phenomenal job with the character studies in Army of the Dead, just doing it off of that kind of plotting. So another thing I wholeheartedly appreciate with Army of the Dead, the zombies actually have personality. Not only do we have a variety of different kinds of zombies, we've got dumb zombies that just kind of go after anyone and anything. We've got smart zombies. We've even got zombies that are in relationships with each other. And that's one of the strongest aspects of Army of the Dead. Every character in this film may not be fully fleshed out, but they are a character. They're not just a caricature that they just needed for bad guy. Every character in this film, regardless of them being nameless, a zombie, a security guard, just a random kid, every character in this film not only has depth to them in some aspect, but they have a part of the story that there's a reason for them to be in the film. And I really appreciate that. And as I already prefaced before, this is a very well-written character drama. Army of the Dead actually does very well in portraying the characters and giving them justice and giving them great amounts of screen time. So this is kind of a 50-50, a positive, and then I'm going to also jump into the negatives at the same time with this one. So one thing I liked but disliked about this film is the filming effects and the camera work. They did a special kind of camera focus where I like that they shined on the characters that are on screen, then they kind of made everything blurry in the background. That's cool. I'm okay with that, especially whenever they're interacting with other people. It really zones you into the conversation. But they also do it an extravagant amount of times, and it gets to the point where when it happens, and a lot of the times it's not even when they're just interacting with each other, they're just kind of, sometimes they'll be walking and the camera will just do that. It'll focus on them and then blur everything out, and there isn't really a reason for it. They just are walking. And within that, the camera focus sometimes, not often, but sometimes also portrays bad CGI. A main example would be when they're going back into the city for their main story job. And when they first run out of the barrel and they run out and they see a bunch of shamblers in groups and they're all dead and they're just kind of laying on each other, the focus, the camera focus and the camera work, just, you can tell it's CGI, and it makes it look like really bad CGI. That was really the only part that I noticed that the camera focus made that happen. So unfortunately, alongside the zombie genre cliche jokes, we also got some zombie cliche tropes. And by that, I mean one scene in particular, which was standard routine zombie go scene. I didn't really like that. I liked the character that was in that scene. I liked all of the characters that were involved in that scene, but they ended their story with a very standard, very cliche just go scene, and I didn't like that. Honestly, in Army of the Dead, I think it would have been more refreshing if they had shown the lead up to a death of people, but not actually show it. Leave some ambiguity. I think that would have done this film a lot more justice than showing graphic deaths. That's just my personal opinion. That's just my personal art style and opinion for Army of the Dead. I mean, still a phenomenal film either way. So, my biggest gripe with Army of the Dead is that it's a fun and very cohesive, thought-out film up until, I'd say, the last hour. Then, and don't get me wrong, this happened throughout the film, just not nearly as often, but the last hour of Army of the Dead is filled and plagued with just stupidity. Okay, every character makes stupid decisions. The very first one being they get to place that they need to get to, grab money, and then somehow they separate and they kind of just become pairs at one point, and then the zombies end up going on a barricade trying to kill everybody, and they start to find them and they start to try and kill them, so they have to survive. Well, two characters in particular that are still near the safe, they see zombies or hear zombies about to come, and they have a decision. They need to ditch the money and run, which is what everybody in this world would do, or they go back and get the money and try to get out, which is essentially what they always do in zombie genre. And unfortunately, the latter happens. They go back for the money stupidly, and then they get caught up and left at a wall with zombies, and they're trying to fight off. And don't get me wrong, these scenes have good endings, but the lead up of the good endings are just plagued with zombie cliche. And that's a damn shame, because Army of the Dead, before these scenes and before the third act happens, it actually is a very well-written character study with a lot of funny jokes, some good humor, some good CGI. This is a really well-made film up until the start of the third act. That's why it's really such a disappointment for me to say that for Army of the Dead, because I was really enthused. I was really engaged in this film because of the performances. Every actor and actress does a very good job in portraying their character. Another negative I have, this is really more of a side note, but it's still a negative. Why did we need a safecracker? I mean, the main story revolves around a guy that hires one guy to pull up a team of people to collect his money from his safe in the city. Why didn't he just give them the code to his safe? They had to hire a safecracker for $250,000 when the guy that created them could have just given him his code. It was his safe. That's just a really baffling plot device to me. Didn't really add up, didn't really make sense. So all in all, overall, Army of the Dead is a really well-written film. Regardless of how you feel about the third act, I still enjoyed the third act. I really wish they had done more with the third act, but I like the movie overall on its own individual and just all together. So overall, Army of the Dead for me, I was really leaning on a 9 out of 10. But after creating this review and really displaying all of the positives alongside the negatives, I'm not hearing a justification for a 9 out of 10. This is a really good film. I really enjoyed it. But it's not a 9 out of 10 enjoyment because of all the flaws I listed. To me, Army of the Dead is sitting more at an 8 out of 10, which is comparable to my review for Zack Snyder's Justice League. But I do have to say, though, Zack Snyder is back. As long as major studios don't come in and interrupt his directing and writing process, I think Zack Snyder makes great films. With that being said, the reason he makes great films, like, dislike it, Zack Snyder has a very unique process in filmmaking. Every single film that he's made has its own art style. It's a visual treat. He's basically a more artistic Michael Bay, although even for Zack Snyder, he has better writing skills than Michael Bay. You can like and dislike Zack Snyder's filming abilities, that's fine, but you have to at least admire that he does try to do new things. He does always try to one-up himself. He does always try to do new, unique takes on filming, and I do admire and respect him for that. Sometimes I love what he does, sometimes I don't love what he does. Sometimes he makes great visually glorifying scenes. Other times I can't see a single thing that he filmed. That's just Zack Snyder for you. He's a very unbalanced director and filmmaker. So yeah, overall, Army of the Dead for me is an 8 out of 10. Thank you.